Good evening. Welcome to the council meeting of October 26th, 2015. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we're going to start tonight's meeting with a presentation. I know there's quite a few people here who want to comment on Avalon Bay and maybe comment on some of the other reports that are going to be happening tonight, and we're going to get to that under the comments from the public, which is the second item. But first, we're going to start with a presentation from Wendy Mager from Friends of Princeton Open Space.
Thank you, Mayor. Oops. Is that working? Yeah. Okay. Mayor and Council, I'm pleased to be here to report on a recent development at Mountain Lakes Preserve, which is that on October 18th, we had a dedication ceremony for two new footbridges that were a collaborative project of the municipality and Friends of Princeton Open Space. This project started back in the fall of 2007 when we succeeded in getting a substantial grant from a private foundation. And it was completed in August of this year when Friends of Princeton Open Space volunteers constructed the wooden superstructure of the bridges. And there are some photographs on this picture board here that show that. And at the bottom you can see the two completed footbridges. We want to thank tonight especially the folks in the Princeton Engineering Department, including Bob Kaiser, Deanna Stockton, Fred Schultz, and Alina Ferreira, for all the help that they gave us in the planning, design, permitting issues, construction issues, bid process, and numerous other ways. And we also want to thank the town for working with us on this project, and the Department of Public Works and the Sewer Operating Committee. These footbridges cross two outlet streams of the Stony Brook, and they help make the southern portion of the park more accessible, especially to folks who are not able to clamber over rocks and down steep slopes. And one of the best things about this park is the variety of people it attracts of all different ages and ethnic groups. And on the very morning that we dedicated this, an older hiker told us how much she enjoyed the increased accessibility that these footbridges provided. So Mayor Lempert, I know, was planning to come to our dedication ceremony, and at the last minute had an emergency that took her elsewhere. So tonight, it is my privilege to present her with this gigantic pretend check for $50,000, which represents Friends of Open Space's contribution to this project. And you're very welcome, and I have given the real check to Bob Kaiser, who I'm sure has turned it over to the appropriate authorities. So thank you very much. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you to Friends of Princeton Open Space. I had the opportunity to be at Mountain Lakes over the weekend, and it's a fabulous time to go if people have it. It's just extraordinarily beautiful with the leaves changing. So thank you, and thank you for keeping the trails and the facilities there so nice. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to comments from the public. We will be having a report later this evening on, I know there's been some questions about the work at the garage next to Avalon Bay, but we asked that, and that got put on the agenda after the agenda was put together earlier last week, but there will be a report on that tonight. But if you have comments on any of the reports for this evening, or anything else that's not on the agenda, now is the time in the meeting where we want to hear from you. And we had 2 people who signed up ahead of time, so we're going to start with them, and then we'll open it up to everybody else. And I'd ask that you please try to keep your comments to 3 minutes. So we'll start with Gregory Johnson, Sir Gregory Johnson, who signed up. He signed up on over the internet. We're not quite sure that we're still getting that software up and running fully, so maybe not. All right, and then we'll move to Marilyn Besner.
Good evening. I live on Harris Road, just half a block away from the hospital site where the Avalon Bay is doing their construction. And I have smelled this strong odor in the air for at least, on and off in the afternoons, on and off for like the past 5 or 6 weeks. And I have called the police department to comment about, to tell them that there's this strange, very strong smell coming from the hospital site. And I know that they sent out fire trucks to investigate, some firemen or whatever, I don't know what. I never heard back from the police department. I never heard from the fire department about what it was, but I know that there were fire trucks sent out to investigate. And my concern is that we don't know what these odors are from. Nobody told anybody that there were going to be odors, and that, I spoke to some high school kids who told me that they smelled the odor in their classroom in the afternoon, at like 2:30 in the afternoon. They could smell it, from one day to the next. They never knew when. And also, neighbors, kids who play outside in the afternoon have been, complaining of headaches and, other kinds of, just smelling this terrible smell that is really, really strong. And so I'm reporting this and asking, what the council knows about this and what we should know about it.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to collect all the questions and then make sure we address them all during reports.
State their name.
Oh, and please state your name
Sure.
and your address.
Stephen Petreka. I reside opposite the parking garage there. So for those of you who may not know, there's been quite a strong odor for some time, and most recently Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of last week, where complaints were lodged with Jeff Grosser, I believe, who's handling this matter. And basically I had a conversation with him today, which was a little bizarre, because at the end of this conversation I wanted him to just simply answer a question about why nothing was done to stop it. I emailed Bob on Thursday. I didn't receive a response. I spoke to Jeff today, and frankly I was a little insulted by the update that was released by him, because it really just, if I can paraphrase quickly, that this was Friday, so this was after the work was completed, after he knowingly let them complete the work, that paint odors were reported, that odors are coming from the garage. And then he defines air pollution. And then the kicker of this was that we have the ability, or he had the ability, to halt operations, which I thought was a typo when I read it, because, so wait a second, there's all these complaints, and you could have stopped it, and you didn't stop it, within walking distance of a school. And I was told about his staffing concerns today, which frankly aren't my problem, because if the office is here, you could probably walk down to the site in 5 minutes to check it out yourself. If toxic chemicals aren't enough to get somebody to do something, what is it going to take? So my question that I wanted answered was, why didn't you shut it down? And what would it have taken to shut it down? Somebody passing out? What would it have taken? And how are we supposed to think moving forward with the issues at the hospital site? Are we supposed to put our trust in you guys that something's going to be done if there's another issue? Hey, I got your email, I'm looking into it. Nothing. Radio silence, okay? Not acceptable. Last summer, at a Saturday night, I lodged a complaint online about an exhaust fan at the garage site. Monday morning, Bob was at my front door with two other gentlemen. I was blown away. Wow. I live in an awesome town. I make a complaint. I thought it was, kind of not the biggest thing in the world. He was there. This is a serious matter, and all you're told is to lodge complaints, lodge complaints, lodge complaints. What is the purpose of lodging these complaints if nothing was done? Nothing was done. Why? We demand answers. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Cohan, and I'm married to the angry guy. We live at 46 Henry Avenue. Mr. Litterman, I see your daughter walk home every day from school. I'll email all of you a PDF. I'm the daughter of a PI and a cop, so I know to record everything. I have a really detailed PDF I'll send you about what transpired, but the biggest element in that document is the fact that Wednesday, I called the office to complain about an unnerving strength, this odor. I was on my way to Community Park to pick up my children. I asked for Mr. Kaiser, because that's been our point of contact. I was transferred to Mr. Grosser's voicemail. We played phone tag. I see you. And as we walked home, there was still that incredibly strong odor, and I could not believe literally my nose. Then the kids and I left our house to go see a volleyball game at PHS. We stepped outside our door, little after 5, and we were overcome by fumes. This is like, I don't scare easily at all. I wondered if I was going to pass out. My throat burned. I have symptoms that happened from this. Again, I'll send you the document. I have to tell you, it was terrifying. And I did a shout out to Facebook, because that's what I do, PR and social media. This is a PR disaster. I'm like mortified that this is even happening. In fact, when I spoke to Mr. Grosser the next day, I said, you better get in CYA mode, because nobody knows that you, A, have to stay on site to file a complaint. Everyone thinks, I'll just call Access Princeton. That's actually not the policy. That's not the procedure. You have to stay on site. What if you don't live as you walk by the garage at Avalon Bay and you smell that toxic smell where, conveniently, that's the only sidewalk on that street? You have to, if you want to be safe, use that sidewalk and walk through those fumes. Is a citizen supposed to stand there? Another CP mom filed a complaint, I think, on Friday at 9 in the morning. An inspector came after 2. Naturally, he couldn't verify it because, of course, it's number one, it's subjective. Number 2, how many hours had passed? I am so embarrassed and mortified, and the honestly bending of the truth and the backpedaling. I asked Jeff, why didn't you shut down the site? He said, well, it's really fines that get their attention. Time is money. You shut down a work site, that's time. I know Avalon Bay doesn't care about PR. I have done PR for developers. This whole fiasco, it happened when we were moving here. I'm so mortified. And here we are. My kids got gassed on their steps. Every time they smell something weird, is it toxic odors? I'm not, an alarmist. I'm not trying to freak them out. It happened to us, again, I'll send you the information. But I want you to look in their faces, because there's a school and a preschool and a high school and a junior high and my crossing guard and everybody, the cops, everybody working outdoors. It's not about me. This is about everybody. Thank you.
Heidi Fittenbaum, 38 Carnahan Place. I came home, I think it must have been on Wednesday, and I was driving down Henry to get onto Carnahan where I live. And and the windows of my car were closed, but the vents, for fresh air were open. And within, 5 seconds, my entire car had filled with these toxic fumes. And I knew immediately that they were volatile organic compounds, because this is something that I work with in green building all the time. So I recognized the smell right away. And I knew that they were also toxic, and that was confirmed when I received the MSDS sheets from Bob Kaiser. I called the police because it was after hours. When I got out of my car, I realized that it wasn't like something wrong with my car that had filled itself with, toxic odor. And, I was walking around the street a little bit to try and understand, where had this come from? And as I approached the sewer grates, and in fact there's one right in front of my house, I could smell the smell coming from there. So I was really perplexed by that. And I walked down to the bottom of the street where the storm sewer lets out into that little stream, and again, I could smell it there. And I ran into a couple of other people walking a dog. I said, "Do you smell that smell?" "Yes." "Okay." So I called the police to report this because it was after hours, and I thought this was a serious hazard for the neighborhood. Didn't have any idea where it was coming from. And then subsequently I sent Bob Kaiser an email regarding this matter to let him know that I was concerned that this was not only just in the air, but in the storm sewer system. And after supper, I walked up my street, and sure enough, I could smell it coming out of every storm sewer grate. I walked over to Harris. It was not in those storm sewers. I walked over to Witherspoon. That was also a bit of an adventure, but we'll save that for another day. And I couldn't smell it there. So clearly, I don't know if there's a connection from on-site down Carnahan Place, but I am fairly certain, without doing the investigation and doing the chemical testing, that some of this was dumped into the storm sewer system, which leads to our streams. Even without that being the case, in order for this smell to be that strong in the neighborhood, now we're talking about out of doors, a well-ventilated area. For it to be that strong, there has to be such a huge volume of this chemical in the air for you to be able to detect it. And it is just unconscionable. And I really can't agree with my neighbors more. I've been experienced, I didn't even know this was happening until Wednesday, but this past week I have suffered 3 migraine headaches, one of which woke me up in the middle of the night and I could not get back to sleep. That's never happened to me. Now, can I show causality? I cannot. But I am super concerned. I'm thinking about the health of everyone in the neighborhood, particularly the young children whose bodies are smaller, and their uptake of this material, which clearly from the MSDS sheets shows that it is a known carcinogen and a neurotoxin. And it is just, we can't just shake in our shoes and hope that this will go away or that they'll finish doing this work. What is the next thing that they're going to do? It's time. It's time for the leaders of our town to take action. And I know that the New Jersey DEP has a task force on air pollution. Is that a resource that we can use? We need to use every resource at our disposal. Because when there are poisons, and quite frankly, there are other materials that do the same thing that don't have this high level of VOC. just want to conclude by saying it is time for you to take action. Even if that puts, us at legal risk. People's health is on the line. That's not okay.
Good evening. Is this an opportunity for things that are not on the agenda? My name is Ted Hordensky. I live in Lawrence. I do business in Princeton as Princeton Computers. The topic of odors motivated me to bring this up. I brought this to the attention of the sewage department. I believe that's what you call it, the folks down on River Road. Almost every time I pass down Witherspoon Street on the north side of the sidewalk as I pass Agricola and Joffrey's Hair Salon, there is a distinct sewage odor that seems to be emanating from the steel sidewalk grates. And each time I pass by, I come to the conclusion that it's coming from the grates of the hair salon. And I mentioned it to some of the management people at Agricola, thinking they would be concerned because it's not a very enhancing odor for people who are about to eat dinner. So I thought you should know that there's probably a sewage problem there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Kate Warren, Jefferson Road. I have two things. First, I'm not super active in town, but I spend a lot of time on one or two issues, and so I wanted to thank all of you, realizing how much time you spend on many issues. And secondly, I wanted to ask about the COA update. So is this going to be a report of substance this evening, or simply a report from the attorney saying, we've done X, X, X? Do we have the vacant land survey done? Are there reports that have been issued? So I don't mind sitting here, but I want to make sure that I'm going to see or hear something of substance rather than simply a letter was written, we're talking to people, so that's my question.
It's going to be a process update tonight, but we are working on putting together a date for a public meeting that's likely going to be in mid-November, a joint meeting with the council and the planning board where we'll be talking about specific sites. But the update tonight is just on the process.
But have some reports been issued, like the vacant land survey, has that actually been completed and sitting somewhere with someone?
Yeah, I think that Mr. DeShield's going to do that when we get to reports, but I want to make
Okay.
sure at this point everybody gets a chance to
Sure,
talk.
thank you.
Sure.
Paul Driscoll, Harris Road. I just wanted to say that regarding the odors that's emanating from the hospital site over the last few weeks, that I share the concerns with my neighbors about the toxic odors, and I've walked past it twice and noticed that the odor was extremely strong, and it was resulting, it smelled more like a paint or a lacquer company that I visited when I called on them as customers. But the main difference was I was on Harris Road, I was outside, and the odor was at least as strong as what I would smell when I walked inside a lacquer company, which is not very well ventilated and where the odor is very contained. So I'm very concerned about that, and so in relation to that, I have two questions. Considering that Avalon Bay has done a lot of work scheduled between now and the time when the complex is completed, is it possible to ask them to provide the town with ample notice as to when such hazardous work is to be done? In other words, if you know in advance that this work is going to be scheduled, the neighbors can be notified. And in some cases, one neighbor was telling me this afternoon, if they could get out of town and go stay with their parents or something like that, they would do that. They would have that option because they're very close to that site. And then the second question is that when I attended a Board of Health meeting and expressed concern about demolition dust, I was advised that people could wear masks at that time, respiratory masks. I don't know if that helps that much, but I could see where it might help somewhat. And I'm wondering in this case, if, in the case of toxic fumes, if a respiratory mask would be of some help. I mean, it sounds like I'm being facetious, but my wife is Japanese in Japan. A lot of people wear respiratory masks every day going to and from work and when they're out in public. So maybe during this construction project, people would choose to do that. And I would just like to hear what Mr. Grosser has to say in reference to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments? Yep, please come up.
Tom Rooney, Jefferson Road. A few years ago, I had to get a dead tree cut down in my yard, and I had to go to the township with a plan, a little map, and everything else. Currently, I'm trying to get a wood-burning insert into my fireplace, and I have to have the chimney swept before they'll even put the metal flue up there. Yet Avalon Bay can come in here, knock the place down. Everybody with a half an ounce of sense knows that a hospital site is contaminated. You don't have to be a scientist or anything else to know that that site's contaminated. Capping it's going to do no good. No, it's going to do absolutely no good. Every time you dig it up, there's going to be stuff coming into the air. These fumes are disgusting. This should never have been allowed to happen. And the last question, the first question I really have for you guys, what about the guys who were putting this stuff down? Who was looking after their interests? I can't imagine. I've walked past that site every day with my dog, and just absolutely amazing, the smell. Now, if you all lived in the neighborhood, I know Mr. Liverman does, he has to have been exposed to this stuff. You know, what happens to us now? And the lady who brought up the migraine headaches, I haven't had a migraine in years. I've had 3 in the past 2 weeks. You know, so somebody has to do something. You can't let these people, they can't be the ones who decide what to do in our neighborhood. The people here should be deciding what happens in our neighborhood, and it has to be safe. All these kids walking to school, back and forth to school, people need to know about this. The schools need to have letters out there. We get a letter, we get an email every time there's a bomb scare or some type of threat to the school. This is a threat every day to these people. Not a word. Nobody has said a word about this. When I called I called the 411 number, or whatever it was, the guy came and looked out my backyard. What does he think I was running out there, a still or something? I mean, what are you going into my backyard for? It's obvious where the smell coming from. So why come to my backyard? So it's just time to do something. You have to shut the place down until they decide that they're going to treat this neighborhood like a good neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
The taxi drivers, I'm sorry, they came to say a few words. This is the time where you guys could speak, because...
Good evening. My name is Yves Jean-Pierre. I have been driving taxi in Princeton for 17 years. Well, this last 2 years, we are struggle because a lot of private cars come to Princeton, picking up a job in front of us. There's nothing has been done about it. And we lost about 70% of our business. And we're paying $5,000 a year for insurance. And we have to go through fingerprints every year. But these people, they don't do the same as us. And we struggle. I mean, we're losing 70% of our business. I mean, every Friday, Saturday, like 40 cars coming from New York. With New York's plate now, not New Jersey. Pennsylvania, same thing. Picking up job in front of us. I mean, I used to do good, not anymore. I'm struggling right now. And I'm just coming here to see what you guys can do for me. Please, we need help. We really need help. Imagine 70% of our business is gone. I used to go home like sometime $200 a night. Now I don't even make $70. And I have kids in college. Please, we really need help. I mean, 28 car, the town issued 28 license. And sometimes if you could walk or drive through Princeton, It's a big line. And the other car picking up job in front of us. Please, we're calling out for help. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anybody from the Code Review Committee want to say something in response?
Well, the code review, we haven't looked at the issue of Uber. Is that what you were talking about?
Well, we did look at it. They're not legal.
Right, I mean, right,
New
we did, but
Jersey
we
and-
didn't look at our policies toward it, but it's not legal. I mean, everybody should understand that
We don't regulate them.
Uber is already illegal under the state regulations.
Okay, we can't have the back and forth with you in the back of the room, but thank you for, and I think that there was some effort on the state level to take a look at it, so when we were doing our ordinance, we were waiting to see what was going to happen at the state level on that.
Well, we did, I mean, the problem is that Uber is already illegal. Our ordinance prevents it, and so does the state regulations. So anybody who takes an Uber should understand that they're taking an illegal car.
It really is a police issue. We do have
Right.
our Chief Sutter is here, and it's just a question of whether we can apply resources to tracking down Uber cars, how difficult that would be.
That's exactly correct, Ms. Butler. It is on our public safety agenda, actually, for this week. We actually have it on there because we realize it's an issue. From an enforcement standpoint, it's very, very difficult. And I would also feel, I would like to review more in depth the ordinance too and see if there's possibly more language that we can add to help make it a little bit easier for us to enforce that as long as it's legally allowable. So we're going to look at this comprehensively and see, the best ways to address it.
Well, if you want to bring it back to the ordinance committee, we certainly would be happy to reconsider it, because we spent a lot of time on this. We met with the taxi cab drivers, and because we can't regulate between municipalities, we also have a problem with back and forth to the train hello. Oh, thank you. They cut me off. We have trouble, our cab drivers suffer at Princeton Junction train station too. So I think that when we were looking at it this summer, we were looking at the number of Uber drivers in the area as we were working on the ordinance. It wasn't too many, but if it's gotten worse, I do think we should think about applying resources.
Sure. Is there any way that we can maybe do like an education program? Because I think a lot of people don't realize that it's illegal or they shouldn't be using Uber. I think that that's... No, I really don't. I don't
think it's going to help.
No, I think a lot of people, especially the younger generation, everything is an app. And they run their lives through an app, and they have an app for Uber, and they dial it, and they move on. But I don't think they understand the magnification that is what it's doing to other people that are trying to make a decent living. So I'm thinking that maybe a little education will go a long way here.
Okay. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Wilson. I have a little flyer if you have a chance to take a look at it.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Okay, I'm going to close public comment, and then we'll move to reports. And why don't we have the first report tonight be on Avalon Bay? And I know Mr. Kaiser and Mr. Grosser can come and brief council. Just as by way of introduction, I was out there Wednesday afternoon. I, like a lot of the parents, was out picking up my own child, and actually drove by staff who was on site. Mr. Kaiser was there, Mr. West and Mr. Grosser, and the smell was really strong. I think there's no denying that, and at that point the work had stopped, and it was not allowed to start again on Thursday morning until it was cleared by staff. But anyway, I want to turn it over to Mr. Kaiser and Mr. Grosser.
If I can, before they start, I just wanted to make it very clear in terms of staff. They've been very diligent in terms of following up on all these complaints, and then just to assure the public that is our first business is to ensure the public safety, and our staff are working hard to do that, and they will detail to everyone here what steps we take and what steps we will continue to take in the future.
Thank you very much. Perhaps I can start out by providing some background, and then Mr. Grosser and Mr. West, if necessary, can fill in. The work on the parking garage has been ongoing for, I guess, the past 8 or 9 months, and there's been a firm that's been jackhammering out the slabs of the garage, installing new rebar, installing new concrete. And after that work was completed, I guess about 2 months ago, they started doing the coating of these, of the decks of the garage. It's the same firm, it's Lake Construction. Lake Construction previously was hired by the Princeton Medical Center to do work in the garage, so they're very knowledgeable regarding the garage. They started doing the upper coatings, and it's the exact same process that they were doing Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But in that particular case, because the work was being done at the upper levels of the garage, apparently had dissipated, and there was very little smell of the odor. On Wednesday, we received a call. I became aware of the situation, I guess, late in the morning, coordinated with Mr. Grosser. We went out, we took a look at it, and as Mayor Lempert had indicated, they had finished with that work, but we gathered information to see what they were installing at that location, and try to determine what was causing the odor. And what they had told us is that the base course of material that they install, that's the first course over the concrete, is much thicker and has more odor. We spoke with the people that were actually doing the installation. We were in the garage and walked around and so forth. And they had indicated that the second and third coats, which are required, are much less of an odor problem than the first coat. And we gathered that information, and then that evening, Mr. Grosser became aware of a number of C-click fixes, contacts and so forth. Had contacted myself, I guess, about 9 o'clock in the evening. We got a hold of Avalon Bay. We reaffirmed you're not to do any work whatsoever until we could meet. We set a meeting at 8 o'clock that next morning, just going over the protocol as to how things were to be done. What we had determined is, because of the wind conditions on Wednesday, it appeared that with the wind coming from the south, that the breeze was coming into the garage and then pushing the fumes to the north. And as Mrs. Fichtenbaum had indicated, regarding the drains, I became aware of that particular concern as well. Inspected the inlets, inspected the outfall, could not find anything unusual, and so what we had concluded is, with the breeze coming in from the south, apparently the storm drains in the garage were acting as a draft for some of those fumes to be discharged. But we checked very closely to see if anything perhaps was dropped into those inlets in the garage area, couldn't find anything, and also checked the inlets from the garage all the way down to the outfall at Geo. So in following up, Mr. Grosser had indicated they had contacted the Mercer County Health Department. The Health Department was on site early Wednesday morning, early Thursday morning as well, and perhaps Mr. Grosser can relay what had occurred after that meeting and during that meeting.
Sure. Thanks, Bob. as Bob discussed, the Mercer County Division of Public Health responded Thursday morning prior to work resuming to ensure that, well, number one, the problem was not still occurring, and then what the next steps were going to be prior to starting work back up again. Our response on Wednesday, as Bob discussed, also included going inside of the site, which was when we determined that the primer coat was being used. There's been discussion over whether or not work was halted or if they were just completed. And at the time, work had been completed for the primer coat. However, we informed the project manager at the time that no more work would continue until Thursday morning when we had, until further notice, which ended up being Thursday morning when we met on site to get more information. The Mercer County Division of Public Health, when they responded Thursday morning, responded to a odor investigation, an odor complaint from our department. Their office is responsible for enforcing air pollution regulations for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. They have the same enforcing authority as the state when it comes to immediate enforcement and penalties. That's not to say that as local officials we cannot work to halt an operation if we feel like it's an immediate threat. And at the time when we first responded, again, the work was not ongoing. We recognized that it was an issue. Work was not going to continue through the night, and an update was put out within 24 hours for that. The Mercer County Division of Public Health was on site Thursday and Friday responding to complaints that came in through the Warren DEP hotline, as well as complaints that came in directly through our office. Their process of investigation is to, and again, this is something that I've been discussing with the public, is that their initial investigation begins at the home of the individual of the complaint, and they attempt to observe a similar odor that the complainant has complained about or made notice about. If they do recognize that odor, they follow the odor upwind to the source. At that point, we had already identified the odor of the source, or the source of the odor, due to the characteristics of that specific odor. So at that time, they were responding, knowing what the odors were, but did not verify any complaints on Thursday or Friday that were similar to what we experienced on Wednesday while Bob, Jack, and I were out on the site. 2 weeks ago, we did receive complaints through C-Click Fix. I know individuals are saying that complaints were coming in weeks ago. On C-Click Fix, as it's documented, 2 weeks ago, we did receive complaints regarding some type of paint-like odor. The health department did respond as many times as the complaints came in, which was 3. And at the time, the odors were not found to be on site of the complainant, which means at that time, that complaint is not verified, and that's a state law. On Wednesday was a different story when we responded, and we could observe the odor off-site.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions from council? I had a few, but I'll start with Ms. Carmiller and then Mr. Liverman.
Wait, so you weren't able to halt, you were able to, after you found out that the thick bottom coat was causing the odors, it was too late, it had already been finished, is that what you're saying?
That's correct. That was the product that was used on the 3rd and 4th deck of the parking garage. This was the last floor that they were putting it down, but they had put it down on the other garage floors.
And then they said, the next coats won't be as harmful? Is that what? And then
that's what was communicated to us, was that the 2nd and 3rd coat was a different material, which we verified through, obviously, by seeing the product on site as well as through the MSDS. The company that manufactures the product was also contacted to verify this information, and at which point we had the county on site, which again are trained odor enforcement officials, and they were in agreement that they could resume work if they were using the other material as long as the site was monitored and odors were not consistent with what we smelled on Wednesday.
So it still was emanating toxic fumes, but they weren't bad enough to halt them altogether. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'll let Bob speak to it as well, but when I was on site on Thursday morning, the odors on site, even in the parking garage, were not consistent with what we observed on Wednesday.
Also, I'd like to mention that to help reduce the odors, we also directed them to drop tarps that were up in the air along the Henry Road side of the garage as well, and that seemed to help on Thursday and Friday.
I mean, I just would like to know from the, like, in the future, could we just stop this when it's going on, like?
Well, I have a question just about the materials, because the sheets that were put up on the website were alarming. I mean, it looks like materials that shouldn't be legal, but I assume that they're legal. And then my follow-up question would be, as a local municipality, do we have any power to review our ordinances again? Can we have stricter laws in terms of what sort of chemicals or paints or solvents people are allowed to use?
Can I just add something to what the mayor said? Is it a commercial product that was used, and are there instructions that come with a commercial product about how it's to be applied so that if indeed there are toxic fumes coming out of it, that people aren't exposed to the toxic fumes? Very often when you buy a commercial product, let's say you're going to polyurethane floors. The product comes with very specific instructions about use of the product. Was this a commercial product? Were there instructions about use of the product?
This was a commercial product. And, okay, Mark.
If I could, I think it's important to note that this was a commercial product. They were using it outdoors, so one of the things had to be well ventilated. The assumption is when you're using it outdoors that it's a well ventilated area. There were circumstances that happened on that day that all came together that made it a lot more, the smell, the odor, a lot more than it would have been if not all of those circumstances happened on that day. So I think that's important to note in terms of what's going on. But this is a commercial product that should have been able to be used outdoors in a well-ventilated area. Unfortunately, we did have an occurrence. And I think it's important to understand that staff, really what we can do is once we identify that there is a problem, it's just what staff did, which is to go out, identify what the problem is, stop it. And again, we did that evening, stopped it the next day to make sure that it won't happen again. And again, that's the authority that they have. They brought in the county, which is the next level above them, in order to make sure that that does not happen again. So staff really, I believe, followed through all the steps that they need to follow through at this point.
I guess I still had a question, and maybe it's for a different meeting in case we need to research it, but do we have the ability as a local municipality to have stricter rules about paints or other things? I know that, we have the green building checklist, that this might be, I don't know if this is something where we can make a law and ban it locally. Or maybe we'll wait and do some research on that, or unless people know for a fact we can't.
I don't know the answer at this time.
Right, I have that question too, and I do thank the staff for your diligence. It sounds like you went out in the middle of the night, after hours, and did what you could. Thank you for doing
Yeah, I was going to...
I think Mr. Lerman and then Mr. Simon.
Thank you. First of all, I'm going to thank the staff for doing what they could do. I also want to, I live in the neighborhood, and I apologize to the neighbors, for this unfortunate incident. But I don't think that who we need to blame or beat up on is our staff. They work hard, they do what they can do. I understand the frustration, I hear it loud and clear, but I don't think we need to beat up on our staff. What I am asking is this going to happen, can we, as Mr. Driscoll said, have Avalon Bay understand that this is a neighborhood, and that we want to be notified if they are going to be using any toxics or anything that's going to leave that site, that we should be notified. And also, if there's anything that is harming their employees, the people that are applying the material. I mean, if it's that strong on the outside, they must have noticed on the inside also. So we're trying to protect their employees also. So if we can just find that out, I think that'll be the best thing. And if they can let us know between now and the job's over, if they have anything else that they're going to put out there, that would be excellent.
And I can provide an update in that regard. Mr. Grosser and I walked the garage today. They were painting today. There's latex-based paint that they need to apply. There's oil-based paint that they're applying to the steel beams. And we met with the project manager. He indicated that that work is going to continue over the next 2 weeks. We walked around the outside of the garage. We couldn't detect any paint smells today, but if anybody becomes aware of it, we certainly want to know about it. We also spoke to them. We said, gosh, we should have been aware of this prior to it occurring. And we asked them if the Lake Construction, the firm that did the work, if they had advised them that something like this could happen. And they said, no, they didn't. And the project manager assured us that if he was aware of it, he certainly would have. So we pressed him and we said, well, moving forward, is there anything else that we should be concerned with? And there was, or there is moving forward, the roofs have to be installed on the buildings. And he said when the rubber roofs are installed, there could be a strong odor. And that is not expected to occur until sometime next year. So we certainly want to coordinate very closely with them regarding the roof installation of these rubber roofs.
I had a couple of follow-up questions. The first is, were there any complaints on Thursday or Friday? Or was Wednesday the only day that we had complaints?
Complaints came in Thursday and Friday that were directed towards the county, meaning that we were referring complaints to them that we had received late Wednesday and Thursday. There were lingering complaints that were coming in, that they'd still observed some odors. Those complaints were investigated and they weren't verified. There was obviously a lapse in some of the complaints. Some of the calls maybe came in on Friday morning. Some of those weren't investigated till later in the afternoon because we were backlogged for some of the other complaints. So we were going forward from the most recently received complaint and then working backwards. When the county was on site, they spent the latter part of Friday there, but our inspectors from the health department were on site Thursday and Friday trying to follow up on some of those complaints that came in from Wednesday night.
All right. The second question is, well, it's a little hard to phrase this right, but looking at what was posted about those two chemicals that were used, one says toxic if inhaled, one says extremely harmful if inhaled. So the question then becomes, aside from stopping work, what else should be a proper public response to this? It seems almost like this should have been treated like a hazmat spill in terms of warning people that there was a toxic substance in the air. And I don't know what the appropriate mitigating response is, but that's what I'm asking. And if we don't know, how do we learn about that ahead of time rather than after the fact?
I'm going to try a little bit, and then Jeff, please jump in because you're the expert in this area. I think it's what's important to also understand is the sheets that were on are really for those people working with the chemical. Not necessarily from a public perspective of it leaving the site, and I believe that's...
Well, I think also furthermore, that evening the fire department did respond, and they do have access to the hazmat team, so the hazmat team was not called. They did respond on Wednesday evening for those odors. In an event that you would have something where you were required, or you were concerned about the immediate risk to health and safety in that area would be completely shut down from people walking through it, etc. But at the time when we were outside, again, the odors were significantly worse on the inside. And as the mayor mentioned, she drove by at the time. She did sense an odor, but at that time when we responded, it was not an immediate risk to health or safety.
I'm sorry, what time was that? And by then it had dissipated enough that it wasn't considered a risk?
No, it was very, well, strong.
It was strong.
It was strong.
But it wasn't to the point where we would shut down the area.
Wait, even knowing, did you already know what these chemicals were, or did you not know that at that
Again, the MSDS sheets are, as Mr. DeShield mentioned, for those that are working with the product, the exposure that can happen is typically on an acute level in a short-term basis. The exposure that we had while we were on the sidewalk, again, was not to the point, and Mr. Kaiser can also let us know what he thinks, but it wasn't to the point that it was debilitating.
And so, I guess actually that is, what's the standard that?
It actually is. It's a physiological debilitation, is a 4 or 5 on the odor scale, which the county and we would be looking at from the odor threshold.
I'm sorry, so if we don't have that level, then you can't do anything, is that what you're saying? Or?
No, from the standpoint of actually, the job had already stopped. So at that point, aside from the county coming in and verifying it from their standards, there wasn't any other action that they could do. But since the work wasn't continuing, the odors certainly were not getting any worse.
Responding to that based on your inquiry in terms of a hazmat response, that would not happen unless it reaches the level that he was talking about. I believe that's what he's responding to. In terms of if there is an odor, a strong odor that emanates from the property, and again, that's what once we discovered that, he was able to then shut the job down. At that point, that's what we did.
I understand that, but look, my professional experience is in working with transportation systems, and if there's a spill from a truck or a train, and it's a harmful chemical, then there can be evacuation. And so I don't know the standards I don't know the public health standard that applies to these materials, but the hazard pictograms, which look like transportation placards to me, look like they're hazmats. And so what is the threshold for, there's a public safety issue, a public health issue that needs to be addressed that could include evacuation of the neighborhood? Do we know that, and did we definitely not meet that in this case?
And again, I think the key is everyone's looking at those sheets. Those sheets are intended to provide workers who are intimately working with these chemicals to understand those chemicals. And again, the exposure that we were talking about is quite different, and I think that's the difference in terms of the two standards.
But that seems so fuzzy, because it says, toxic, I forget the words Patrick used exactly, but I remember reading them also, toxic, harmful if inhaled, and people obviously are inhaling them. So I can understand people feeling like something more should be done. And I'm just saying, like Liz, can we, as a municipality, do something? Because they did.
And again, what we did is what we can do, which was we identified what the odor was. It was emanating from the property. We contacted the county, who is responsible for doing that. We'd stop, once we determine what the odor is, you prevent that odor from continuing. We did that. So those are the actions that we can take, and staff took those actions.
I had another question just about letting neighbors know exactly what the process is so we can make sure people know what to do. I mean, hopefully this won't happen again, but I'm confused. I think what you're saying about the county, in order for them to impose a fine, they have to come to someone's property, and that person has to be on their property, and they have to smell it on the person's property in order to have there be a violation? Is that correct?
Yeah, unfortunately, the state regulations don't necessarily make it easy to enforce from the county and the state perspective. And I think that was some of the frustration, was that individuals had to stay at their home, wait for the county to respond, have them verify the odor, take down a statement of complaint, and then process the enforcement action as long as it was still happening at the time of their response. I think that was some of the concern. What I can say from the local level is that between construction, engineering, and health, is that if a job is being performed and noxious odors are leaving the site, that operation can be halted until something else is figured out, whether it's measures like Mr. Kaiser mentioned with respect to the tarps coming down and another product being used, or a halt until further notice or further action. So that is what can be done on a local level. So it's not that we have to wait for the county, but the county, for them to be able to enforce the air pollution regulations, that's the process that it goes by. But I do agree in terms of having a process where individuals know if they're making an odor complaint, this is how it's performed on a local level, this is how it's performed on a county level or state level.
And then, as the municipality, are we the owner of a sidewalk? Does it work that way? Can we register a complaint and be the owner of the sidewalk and complain from the sidewalk?
Again, from the standpoint of a local enforcement, yes, we can certainly say that that's where the odor is being observed, it's off-site, and it's not supposed to be. From the county perspective, no, the regulations clearly state that it has to be a residence or a property from which one person resides.
Generally speaking, this kind of stuff is pretty nasty, and usually has warnings on it. Don't have it come in contact with your skin, use only in a well-ventilated space, may even advise to use a respirator when you apply it. Did the county people actually go on site to where this material was used and check what the odor was at the location where it was being used, or did they go to the location where it was reported?
Yes, so at the first meeting that we had with the county was on site, right where the product was being applied. Not that it was being applied at that time, because again, work had been stopped, but they were right there with the cans of the epoxy or the urethane paint, and they were there along with all the workers, seeing them get suited up, I guess in preparation for working elsewhere or working on the rafters if they were going to do that. So they were on site, they observed the odors that morning, but again, they weren't consistent with what we had described to them on Wednesday afternoon.
Can I have a question? Yes. So Wednesday was the most severe day in terms of the odor, but Mr. Kaiser, you and I had been aware of some complaints earlier, and I had been out at the site maybe the week before trying to follow up on a complaint about a pungent odor. And at that time, it smelled like mild spray paint, perhaps. But I also stopped by on Wednesday, and after the Wednesday in question, and I would have had a hard time staying anywhere in the neighborhood myself. I thought it was really quite strong. Had they done this other days? Had they used the same material other days when the wind was blowing in a different direction and it had dissipated more quickly?
They have used this exact same material on the other upper floors, and there was some concerns that we had received at that time, minor concerns. I know Mr. West was out there, a representative from the health department was out there as well, and perhaps they could get a whiff of the material, but it was just an occasional whiff.
So was this the first level of the parking garage? Was this the lowest level of the parking garage? Is that why it...
It's the second level of the parking garage. So lower level, they are not coating because that level is on earth, so there's no need to coat it.
Is on, I'm sorry, what
It's
did you...
on earth. It's on earth.
okay.
It's on grade.
Okay, all right. But the work is all finished?
The work is all finished as of Friday afternoon.
And do people that are applying this, are they using some sort of respiratory mask?
They're using the approved HEPA organic solvent respirator. So the HEPA filter and the organic filters out the solvent. They're also wearing PPE and gloves. Again, the workers that are using this have to abide by the MSDS to make sure they're in line with that, or else they're breaking OSHA standards and regulations.
Okay.
Bob, you mentioned the next time we might encounter a situation like this would be when they use rubber on the roof. Is that sprayed on?
No, that's a rolled rubber roof, and I guess what is pungent when that operation occurs is the adhesive that is installed, that is used to install the rubber layered roof.
Okay. Well, certainly when that happens, we can inform the neighborhood ahead of time, and hopefully Avalon Bay will be better at communicating what's going on so we can let neighbors know. And I think certainly there's a lot of concern on council. I mean, we share the concern of the neighbors too, and want to make sure, I know staff's on site practically every day, if not every day, monitoring and inspecting, and we just want to thank you for doing that. And yeah, you know, I think we all feel responsible for making sure we're doing every single thing that we can to keep people safe and to enforce the law as strictly as we can. So, thank you.
You know, one more just quick question about the adhesive. Can we require that Avalon Bay uses the least toxic adhesive possible for the rubber roof? Do we have that power to do that?
We can certainly recommend it. It's a conversation that Bob and I will have with their project manager.
And maybe we can look into that, the subject of adhesives, and, or do you know?
I just want to make sure we're clear. We can recommend. I don't believe we have any regulatory authority to force them to do that. We can always make recommendations.
But I think what we can do, a part of the recommendation could also not do as many roofs at one time. I think what happened here with the garage is it was too much square footage done at one time. If they would have done a quarter, whatever, I don't think we would have the odor. But they did the whole, the whole deck. That's gigantic square footage of any kind of chemical. So with the roofing, if we can work a deal, if it's that adhesive, just you don't do as many. It may cost a little more money, but you don't do as many roofs at one time. If it's going to be that kind of, that kind of damage, to the neighbors.
I don't want to open it. We have other things on our agenda, but...
So volatile organic compounds, although you smell them when they're first in the air, in this case, doesn't mean they're gone when you don't smell them. That is why so many regulations have been put in place across the country about coatings. That is why you now have low and no zero VOC paints that people use in their homes. E.P. Henry, who makes this product, also makes low VOC products that could have been used instead of this. If you think that just because we don't smell it, it's not still off-gassing, you're kidding yourselves. Okay? And the MSDS sheet is not just for workers. That is a material safety data sheet. And it talks about the toxicity to the environment, to people, to water, to animals, to everything. That's what those sheets are, okay? And I think that it would be extremely in our interest to have those conversations about the materials, whether it's roofing or anything else that is going to be used on that construction site. So I just want people to really understand a little bit more about what a volatile organic compound is, and the fact that those are neurotoxins and that people are breathing them even if they can't smell them.
Okay. Are there any final comments? All right. We're going to...
Actually, I'm sorry. I do have one. Just reacting to what Ms. Fichtenbaum just told us. I don't need to ask her. This is really a question for Mr. Grosser, is reacting to what she just told us, do we have any way to measure the existing level in the air beyond just I can smell it?
For volatile organic compounds?
For these specific compounds, since we know they were used.
We typically will work and coordinate with the fire department, who has a VOC monitor. They can measure the air for air complaints. It's something that I've actually discussed with Mark and Liz regarding the health department obtaining one as well, especially for air quality complaints.
All right, so if we can do that and we have the equipment, can we go ahead and just do that proactively and find out if we are above or below the current health threshold?
It would certainly assist in the monitoring of the areas, especially with some of these types of complaints.
I think the neighbors would appreciate that. I know it's quite late after the fact, but in terms of doing what we can going forward.
Sure.
I think we all support that. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Thanks, Jeff. Our next report this evening is from Chief Sutter on the August monthly police report.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I make a comment on the police report, I just wanted to make a brief announcement. This Thursday night at 7 p.m., the Princeton Public Schools Superintendent Cochran and myself will be holding a forum at JW School, open to the entire community, where we will give an update on the string of swatting threats that we've had against our schools. We'll be taking questions and providing some updates. And just an aside on that, we've held a series of these forums, I believe 4, over the last 2 weeks at several public schools for the PTOs and at 2 private schools. So these have been a series of ongoing conversations that we're having, but there's a lot of questions from the community, so we thought it would be a good idea to have another one. We had our last community-wide forum in June at the end of the school year. So that's this Thursday. Just wanted to let everybody know that. With regard to the police report, I just wanted to make a general statement. If you've probably been noticing, and we're into August now on our police report, and we're starting to see our indicators are starting to become a little bit more steady, and they're quite up in terms of the different areas from last year. That's all being done while our overtime's been decreasing. So I'm hoping that that's a strong indication of our efficiency. A lot of that has to do with our strategic plan and just our cohesion that we've kind of developed since consolidation. So I just wanted to make that general statement and take any questions if anybody had some.
That's great. Are there any questions? I had a quick question about the, if you could just remind us what the UCR means, because sometimes the UCR would be going up, but the actual numbers would be going down and vice versa, and why don't those track more closely?
UCR is a very complicated definition of crime. It's a way that the FBI basically makes all the different states' crime codes equate. So they define crime in one general way that they use across the board in every community in the United States. Their definitions of crime, and I'm not going to be able to clear it up for you here, but their definitions of crime do not necessarily paint a true picture of what is going on in a community for a variety of reasons. So you may see things like theft increasing, but the related larcenies decreasing in the UCR. That's because how we define theft, we have to match everything up against UCR. So some of our thefts qualify under UCR, and some don't because of the way they were perpetrated. So each one of these incidents is looked and coded every day as they come in, and the codes don't match. So how New Jersey defines theft, I'm just using this as an example, may not be how the FBI for UCR purposes defines larceny. And that's why they're not matching up. That's the same for sexual assault and some other different crimes that are in the UCR definitions. That's a common comment made by people and a common question. And that's UCR for me is it's one thing, but it's really not a good indicator, especially in a community like ours. There's more underlying issues to look at.
Okay. If there's no other questions about the monthly report, I'd like to invite up Paul Leminski from Princeton University Public Safety, because I imagine there might be some questions about the university's new policy on weapons.
Hello.
I don't know if you wanted to explain or just be open for questions.
I'll open up the discussion. So obviously, as you know, Princeton University Department of Public Safety is making a move towards arming their officers in a way that they have access to weapons in critical incidents. Just to give you some background from my standpoint, we have had the opportunity now to train together with public safety in depth from over about the last 2.5 years, I would say, starting from basic tabletop type of scenarios all the way through just short of a full-scale type of training event. And unfortunately, in today's world, and I've used this term before, we have to think of the unthinkable, and we have to plan and think about things that none of us ever want to have to think about. And in doing that, we take into a whole variety of factors, from law enforcement to social to other factors that are specific to our community. But at the end of the day, when you're dealing with these critical incidents, the decision all comes down to public safety and how to save lives. And what we've learned through national events, through our training, and through our in-depth research that we've done together and individually, is that in these type of critical incidents, time can equal lives. The longer it takes for, unfortunately, police armed intervention could equate to a life. The quicker we get there, the quicker we intervene, the quicker we stop it, the more lives that can be saved. And that's just the basic takeaway from these incidents. And if you have watched how these incidents have transpired from way back at Columbine and the way that police tactics have changed, if you remember all those officers in Columbine gathering and waiting to go into the building as a group, that proved tragic, but that was the best practice at the time. It has evolved so dramatically that at this point it's in as quick as you can, stop the threat to save a life. And I believe, in my conversations with Director Ominski, our training over the years has shown that at the critical times, because of geographical proximity and other factors, Princeton Department of Public Safety police officers are most often the ones that are seconds away from where a threat could be, where our police officers are, in the general area, but can take longer to get there. And when I mean longer, again, 60 seconds is an eternity, an absolute eternity in these types of incidents. 30 seconds is a very long time. So with that, this decision was made. I know we've had many discussions over the years. We've had many debriefs after our training, and I have to say that it's a decision that in these specific types of incidents that I support, and I support it based on the fact that it's a public safety issue, and it's a measure being taken that could save a life or lives. God forbid one of these incidents should ever occur here.
Mr. Lerman?
Thank you. I do have a question. I was asked this weekend, would Princeton University police respond to something that's outside of their jurisdiction? For instance, let's say something is at the Institute for Advanced Study, and you had cars that were closer than our police department. Would they respond to something like that? Or, I don't know, maybe they're around a charter school for something, I don't know, just somewhere else. And if there's an instance that we're not there and they are there, would they be able to respond? That came up this weekend.
That particular incident would come down to our policy departmentally, and it's a mutual aid issue, but what I can tell you is in any one of those incidents, let's say it's on the West Windsor border or the Montgomery border or the Princeton University border, we respond first. We are going there, we respond first, we get the call before we make any notifications to anyone. It's our officers that respond
primarily. What that would turn out to, which we would, obviously talk about, like we do with all our colleagues, are mutual aid requests. But what we're talking about here, which is important to remember, is just the critical incidents. So, again, the unthinkable, but one of those calls comes into our dispatch center. We're able to identify the closest car via our technology. Those cars are going, are being dispatched. And there's a lot of things that are happening, but they're happening inside the police department before we ever reach out to another department. The mutual aid issue comes in more protracted type of events. But in that specific issue or incident, no matter where in our jurisdiction, we're responding primarily. There's not even, that is happening so quickly, we just go, and then if we need help, we ask for it. And that's how those incidents transpire. Thank you.
Well, just to follow up on that, are you saying that they don't listen to your radio?
We have interoperability with the whole county. I mean, we listen to everyone, but we don't respond to another jurisdiction until requested. So if there's a critical incident on the border of Hopewell and Princeton, Hopewell's responding to that. If they need our help in some way, shape, or form, they call us and request it. And that's the same way we have that relationship.
You don't go without their request ever?
No, that's not, it's not best practice, it's not prudent, it's really not legal until it's requested from a mutual aid standpoint.
Yeah, Bernie, I'm sorry, you had your hand up. Did you want to? Okay. I understand sort of the things that have led you to come to this decision, although I have to say it's just saddens me that we find ourselves in this state altogether, that this is a necessity, I guess. And so I have a couple of concerns, and one is, do we expect that this is as far as it's going to go, or is this the first step on a slippery slope where the campus police will become fully armed?
So I'll take that question.
I don't mean slippery slope.
I guess you're directing it to me. So this decision by the university is about enhancing our emergency response. It's limited to emergency response for two specific situations: someone brandishing a firearm on campus or an active shooter situation, in which case our sworn public safety officers who have the same training as every other police officer in the state would have access to a rifle to respond. There's not a discussion about arming public safety. I think that's what's at the bottom of your question. So this is about enhancing our emergency response. It's about planning and training and working together, and training is, drilling, as Chief Sutter said. We've had a very successful relationship for the last 2 or 3 years. In his tenure, and I think it's been good for both departments. We work together on a daily basis on a lot of things that have nothing to do with one of these critical situations. But in a situation where there's a critical incident, having our sworn police officers be a force multiplier for Princeton Police is important. We are not changing the current response plan of the Princeton Police. We need them. And in a situation on campus, we can be helpful to them. And that's what Chief Sutter and I have talked about. We will, as a result of this, we will do more drills. We will work together even more closely. These are good things for the community, for the safety of the community. I think that's what both of us care about, is the safety of the community.
So this isn't step one on a multi-step plan to change the policy. This is a discrete.
This is discrete to enhancing our emergency response. Colleges and universities, municipalities all work on their emergency response plans. We are enhancing ours, and we're training and we're preparing our staff for something we never want to see happen. We're very fortunate that the town of Princeton is a very safe community. Princeton University is a safe community, but we have to plan for the unthinkable.
Well, you did mention an incident of someone brandishing a weapon, and So I can understand all the things that have led you to feel like you need to do this for public safety, but there's also, I think we have to recognize that everyone in our community isn't necessarily going to feel safer knowing that people who weren't previously armed are now armed. Not everyone feels safe around the police. And so I guess when I think about, we've seen massacres, but we've also seen Tamir Rice, where, a child was brandishing a toy and was shot. So if you're getting training for these dangerous situations and these critical situations, are you also receiving training we talked about de-escalating, I think, a couple of months ago in our conversations on the police report.
Just if I could jump in, there are strict guidelines and oversight with respect to police officers and firearms in general, and specific to the type of firearm that we use, and it's specific to the individual. If an individual does not show proficiency, does not show exceptional abilities with a certain weapon, they're not allowed to carry it, they don't qualify. And we, with our different systems that we use, we train, which Princeton University will have to do, we qualify, which they will have to do, we forward those records to Mercer County, and they're then forwarded to the Attorney General's office every year. All our qualifications for every officer, they will have to do the same thing. It's not if you want, it has to go this way. But with respect to the community feeling safer, and I understand the point, but, I just see these things that happen around the country, and you're going to want one of these officers that are trained coming into that building if that happens here.
Right.
I just don't know how else to say it. It's a step that's unfortunately in today's society, it's just something that we've trained and seen repeatedly in our training, that if we didn't look jointly to enhance our response, we would be neglecting our public safety. That's, I think, what our joint observations are.
If I can make just one other quick comment, just sort of related to this, which is, in some ways, we're very fortunate that we have an accredited Princeton Police Department and an accredited Department of Public Safety at the university. These are both departments that work to the highest level, that have policies and rules and regulations that meet state and national standards. We both work under the auspices of the Mercer County Prosecutor's Office and the Attorney General's standards that we must meet as police officers, and which I think is important.
Well, could I double back to Councilman Liverman's point, and that is, you've talked about the importance of 60 seconds and what a difference it can make in your rapid response, but these critical incidents don't just happen on college campuses, and I guess I go back, I know it's not a memorandum of understanding, but it's, help me out here with what the agreement is, the
Operational procedures.
Right, and so are we going to get an updated agreement? Because this was, this changes the agreement, and also the boundaries. I do sort of wonder, if 60 seconds is important on campus, why aren't we looking at some way that they can respond across the street?
Two answers. To your first point, it really doesn't change the agreement, although we, as written in the agreement, we revisit it yearly. So every year, at the end of the year, which will be coming up soon, we sit down and go over the whole agreement to see what we can do better, what worked, what didn't work, how we can do better, what we need to change. So with regards to our response in our interaction, it doesn't change the protocol. We're still going, as Director Ominski just said. It's just that we now have I refer to it as a tactical advantage, a tactical change. Advantage is really the point here because of response time.
So I look at it as a quicker response, and as the term Director Minsky used, as a force multiplier. As for jurisdiction, the laws are the law, and it comes down to mutual aid. So there has to be a formal request to go into other jurisdiction, or there has to be a crime committed directly in our presence. If I'm in Hopewell Township and there's a crime committed in my presence, I can take action. Otherwise, I can't barge into Hopewell and respond to one of their calls. It just doesn't work that way. It's state law, and that's the same relationship by statute that we have to have. When requested, we assist each other.
Mr. Miller?
Two questions. First one for Paul. Will your sworn officers carry or have access to firearms?
Our sworn officers will have access to rifles.
Will not carry
They are
sidearms.
not carrying a firearm or wearing a firearm on their hip. This is about rifles, and it's about two very specific emergency situations. Someone brandishing a firearm on campus or an active shooter.
Second question. There are bits and pieces of what might be called the campus embedded in various parts of the community. What happens in the event of someone brandishing a firearm? Let me take an example. Merwick Stanworth, which is not main campus, but pretty much in a residential area in the community.
So Stanworth is now under the jurisdiction of the Princeton Police.
We would respond to that community. We would respond to any call that came into our dispatch center, obviously, that we received. We'd be the primary response, and I would assume usually those calls in town would come into our 911 center. Thank you. Okay. The other question I had, we mentioned someone that may have a gun on campus. Are all the officers uniformed that will be carrying, that will have access to rifles?
Yeah, so the Department of Public Safety is made up of, we have 97 employees, dispatchers, we have security officers. We're only talking about the 32 sworn police officers that have gone to the New Jersey Police Academy. They all are in uniform, wearing a badge, just like the Princeton Police. There are rules about that, yeah.
Because I was just wondering if someone wasn't in a uniform and they took out a rifle, someone may think that that's someone brandishing a gun and call our department, and now we have somebody staying there with a rifle that they may not know, and that, so I'm just making sure that everyone...
So one thing I do want to say, which is, if there's a report that someone's brandishing a firearm or there's an active shooter, we are calling the Princeton Police. They will know right away, right? This is about a joint response. We are not doing this alone. We're doing this together, and I think that's what's been one of the benefits of our relationship, that we become a force multiplier for the Princeton Police. We're going to train together. We're going to do more training together, as Chief Sutter said, and this is a partnership for the safety of the community.
Could I? Why are you using rifles and not handguns? I don't know anything about guns, but it seems like a handgun would be easier and faster.
Well, it's a tactical decision about the types of situations that we're going to go to. This is not about having our officers wear handguns on a...
No, I understand that. I know they're going to be in the car, but I was just thinking, it seems, so a rifle, you think, a rifle's actually faster and more effective in that situation?
Well, if you, not to get into all the tactics, but if you think about a handgun, usually that means you're wearing a holster. You're putting it somewhere. This is much, in a critical situation, having access to a rifle that is in your hands is a better procedure.
Yes, I just want to go back. A couple meetings ago, we reintroduced our police ordinance, and I feel like we took out some language that would have been helpful to our residents about the role of the public safety and the police. And I really feel like we need to, I don't know why it got watered down, but I feel like we need to go back to our ordinance and be clearer with the public about the rights of the public safety, and because I don't want anyone getting into an interaction with the public safety that, you know, they think that somehow they don't have to, you know, listen to them because they're public safety. I think we need to be clear with our public, and we watered down the ordinance.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I should have done in the introduction to this that this is not a council decision, so the Princeton University Public Safety Department reports directly to Mercer County Prosecutor's Office, and I think part of the discussion we had with that ordinance is that we don't want to obfuscate the relationship through the ordinance, and I think most people, when they look at our ordinance books, they assume that those are Princeton municipal laws, that we don't have state laws and county laws written into our own ordinances, because it makes it look like we can change it. And so I know Jenny and I have been working on the website, but I completely agree that this is an issue that's gotten a lot of public attention and public questions, and I would recommend that we get the information up on the website, because that's where people look. I think if we put it in the ordinance, I think it makes it more confusing.
Well, I kind of like the way the ordinance committee presented it, but it...
Right, I thought it was a good place, but I do think that putting it on the website's even better. I think it is a good idea too, because we know, I mean, now I know what a sworn officer, what that means, but I didn't know that before I was a council person. I think it's a fine point that most of our residents don't understand. So I think that's really important that we just, you know, just ward off confusion, like you said.
Like, if don't want anybody to end up in a bad situation because they didn't understand what they were dealing with.
Did anybody else have any issues or comments? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Hopefully, this is a policy that never needs to be used.
I just, while we're breaking up, I just wanted to say this week I also happened to get a news feed from Villanova where my son went to college, and they also are adding their public safety at Villanova. They're adding police force. His reaction was, "Oh my God, that's a terrible idea." But anyway.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next report this evening is on the third quarter revenue and expenditures, and I'd like to welcome up Sandy Webb, our CFO.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here to go through the third quarter revenue and expenditure report, and I'm really happy to say that most everything is right on target, right where we expected it to be at this time of the year when we prepared the 2015 budget. But I do want to go through a couple of highlights with you, and then Mr. Simon sent me an email before the meeting with some questions on. Pat, I'd be glad to go over them now, if that's okay as well. So let me start with the revenue pages. You have 2 pages of revenues, and I want to just point out a lot of them are realized upon the adoption of the budget. So the surplus, all of our grants, all of the money that we move between our different funds. So it looks like, you know, had we looked at this report when we looked at this report in June, all of these were at 100% even then. So it's a little misleading on some of these, but I just kind of wanted to point that one out. On the licenses other, right now we're almost at 100%. Only through September, and when I went back and looked, the health department licenses seem to have rebounded a lot. The last couple of years, we've seen them going down every year. A lot of that tied back to the hospital, when the hospital left for the birth certificates and things like that. So we're glad to see this rebounding a little bit. One word of caution, the municipal court fines. Although this is still kind of holding its own, I think we're going to have a shortfall by the end of the year because we did not hire the enforcement officers immediately, although we had planned on this revenue kind of rebounding back to where it was a couple of years ago. So we may see a small shortage in that revenue line. On the interest and cost on taxes, that's hovering around 51%, but this revenue is, that we'll collect this in the fourth quarter when we have the tax sale. That's when we get the bulk of this money. There's a few others that, I have that we'll collect before the end of the year. For example, Institute Woods and also debt service that they give us. They give us both a pilot and then money for debt service, and we know that we'll collect all that by the end of the year. So that's it on the revenue side. On the appropriation side, and Pat, I'm going to try and tie in a couple of your questions here as well. The mayor and council budget is shown at 13% of spending. This includes the up-to-cap amount, which we talk in depth with at budget prep time. But Patrick was asking, of that amount, there's about $193,000 that's expended under that up-to-cap amount. And some of the things that are shown in here are some of the contracts that we've given to Whitman for the work on the Avalon Bay. There's the Dakota's Special Counsel project, which was for the renewable energy project at the landfill site. That was a $135,000 contract. We have the Cable TV Council negotiation in here. We have the newsletter. We have a special counsel for personnel. We have some work that was done for PC configuration that was approved by administration. But two of the bigger ones also are the work for the Witherspoon-Jackson Neighborhood Historic District and Mazer Consulting for the third round affordable housing plan. So that takes up the bulk of it. But I want to point out one thing. In the expended column here is both expended and encumbrances. So you'll see in some of the comments that I've made that it includes the encumbrance. So for example, the prosecutor or the public defender, we put their contracts on in full once the budget's adopted. So although maybe we haven't paid them through the end of the year, the encumbrance is here as well. Going down a little bit further, the election budget has not been spent yet. Obviously, when the election comes in November, we'll see all of that money disappear. We're short on, or the spending is low on the tax collector budget. Again, a lot of that will go up once the tax sale takes place. The legal budget is right now at about 40% 44%, and we saw that the expenditures were low. I know the legal committee reviews those budgets pretty closely. So all the things that we've been, being proactive on, we're seeing a lot of good results on with the expenditures. And then some of the other expenditures that occur early in the year, the insurances, the pensions, all the grants are expended upon the adoption of the budget. So I think, on a whole, one of the questions Patrick asked is where are we overall with revenues? I believe we're at about 78%, and about 79% on what's been expended overall on the total budget. So I think we're right where we should be. I don't see any surprises coming down the pike toward the end of the year. I think, in some cases, and again, one of Patrick's questions was, what about the group insurance? Are we going to expend all of that before the end of the year? And I think we may see about $100,000 in savings there, recognizing that the employees are contributing more. So that could be one of the reasons for the insurance. I'm trying to think one of the other questions that Patrick had. I'm sorry?
I can run through the email I sent you and just, we can make sure that we, you covered the 193K expenses currently spent. Do you have any projection for the next quarter, how much more will be spent from that?
Well,
that bucket is
Patrick,
1.43 million.
I went back and I looked at where we were in 2014 when we ended with the up-to-cap appropriation. We had about $500,000 left. So we're certainly going to have that. I would suspect that number is going to be around $700,000 or $800,000. Kathy and I were looking at the sheet that Scott had projected when he did the surplus, and I believe that was about $700,000 or $800,000. So I think we'll see that number go up. I mean, unless we see something come down in this last quarter that we haven't accounted for, but for the most part, that budget we're going to have a huge amount left there. You also asked about the reserve for uncollected taxes, and I think I know where you were heading with your question, although you didn't come right out and ask the question. We budget $2.9 million in the reserve for uncollected taxes. So you asked what we have paid year-to-date for the school, which is about $60 million. We owe them about another $12 million. We'll pay them November and December's payment. For the county, we've paid them about $34 million. We'll pay them $45. We have about $11 million left to pay them for the fourth quarter. So I think what you were heading toward was, and jump in if I'm wrong, I think what you were trying to ask is, was the reserve for uncollected number a good number? And we won't know until we know what our cash, or what our tax collection percentage was. We anticipated that reserve for uncollected to be about 98%. So if tax collection is about 99%, we'll be in good shape. If it flips the other way and goes down to 97, then...
Right, so, yep, and I asked the question making a slightly incorrect assumption about how the money actually gets dispersed, which is why I asked it the way I did. But I think the question you could answer now is, what is our collection rate so far this year? Do you have that information?
No, I mean, well, I think on the revenue...
I'm sorry, I don't mean to put... Actually, clearly you can't answer it tonight because I didn't ask it the right way, but
No, that's okay.
You could conceivably look that, find out what that is, or ask the assessor to tell us what that is.
Actually, what I did do was when I put in the realized column for the amount to be raised by taxes, I look at the number of the total taxes that we've collected and what our total levy is, do the math, and we're at about 76%. So we're right where we should be with the collection, so we're expecting it to be up around the 98, 99%. As it's been the past couple of years.
And just so I understand, that 76%, is that of the 98.25 or of the 100%?
Of the 100% of the levy.
I see. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's a good number. Okay. The last question I have, I think this might be the right place to ask it, was on today's agenda we have an overage on road repair materials of $390K, which is obviously not going to show up in this report.
That's right.
But if it had occurred in the last quarter, where would we see it in this report? Would that be under the mayor and council reserve there, or is it something?
Probably, but because this was for road materials, we have road budget money in capital, which is where this would be charged.
In capital?
Right. So you would not see it on this report.
I see. Okay, so if we're over on that,
We're not over in the capital budgets. We were over with what we had estimated for Trap Rock.
For the contract?
Right.
Okay, so this report is only showing us operations, not showing the capital side of the budget?
That's correct. I can add that. I mean, it's not difficult to do, but I don't know if it would accomplish what you're...
Well, we have to think of it a little differently because it can be spread out over a number of years as opposed to all in one year. But it might not be a bad idea for the next quarterly report to have a separate section for capital spending, just so we see that as well. I don't think you need to go back and do it for this quarter unless my colleagues feel otherwise, but...
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Farler?
Well, I should have asked this during the police report, but are we collecting fees yet for false alarms? Because I don't know if everybody noticed how many there were. I mean, there's just so many alarms.
We haven't started yet. It's being implemented as we speak. We've, as soon as the ordinance was passed, we worked on our internal process. We're getting our software ready, and it's actually going to start, we're going to start putting out notice, very soon, and it'll be, registrations will start in January.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. DeShield, the COA status update?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to walk council through the current procedures in terms of affordable housing. As council is aware, there have been a number of changes, particularly with our expert on the methodology, suffering some illnesses. There's been a number of setbacks, and the whole schedule has been changed. So I want to walk you through the new process based on those circumstances. We're now in the process of developing some preliminary sites. Council will review those, and then the planning board will also review those, and they will be later reviewed with the public, but I'll talk about that. So we're doing that this week. The court will have arguments on legal issues in which they're arguing in November, the first week of November, and we'll hold our public meeting to get public input on those potential sites around mid-November. After that, we will be providing the special master of the court with a worksheet which will identify those potential sites for his review on December 7th. We don't expect to receive any of the reports from our experts until December 30th. And again, at that point, that's as far as our actual timeline that we have. At that point, the court will develop a new timeline, but I also want to walk council through what we believe will be the next steps. This can change at any time. But after that, the next activity that will happen is we'll need to get an extension from the court for the builder's remedy immunity. There will then be expert testimonies and arguments now that we have the report on the methodology, and that will focus on the regional and state needs. The court will then make a decision on that methodology, and then the municipalities will then argue their specific municipality needs at that point and what the obligations will be for the municipality. We'll then prepare our fair share plan. The planning board will then hold a public hearing and approve the fair share plan, and then it'll be endorsed by council. And again, I'm giving you highlights. There'll be maybe a number of other activities that occur as we go through this process. After the council endorses the fair share plan, there will be approval we'll need to approve both any zoning amendments. In addition to that, any other resolution or ordinance necessary to facilitate the development of the plan. And again, we expect this to be sometime in early next year for this process to happen. We don't have those dates yet. As soon as we get those, we will provide that information to the public.
Okay. Thank you. And I know I wanted to call up Deanna Stockton because she has a special exciting announcement as part of her report for tonight.
Thank you. Good evening. We're very excited to announce that Princeton has been awarded a grant that we had applied for earlier this year. It's through the DVRPC, and it's the Congestion Management Air Quality Grant for covered bike parking and bike share. So we're looking to locate up to 5 covered bike parking shelters in town, as well as work with the university to extend their current bike rental program into a full-fledged bike share program with docking stations around the community to tie in with the university rental program that was established at the Dinky. So, great news.
Thank you. You have the golden pen, Deanna, so thank you. That's really exciting. And when's the launch for that, would you estimate?
I honestly don't know. It was just, I think, endorsed by the DVRPC board on Thursday last week. So we haven't even gotten the formal letter in the mail, but we'll be following up in the very near future.
Can I ask how much the grant was, or I shouldn't ask that question?
Well, the project cost that we had put forth was about $300,000, and that included about $100,000 that the university would pick up for the shelters and the docking stations on the campus property, and then the remainder of the funding would come through as reimbursement to the municipality for our portion.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. And if I can just do a plug while I'm up here on Bike Matters, we are starting the Bike Master Plan study process. Tomorrow is the first meeting of the Study Advisory Committee here at the Municipal Building at 9:30 a.m. Parsons Brinkerhoff will be here as well as all of our, I think, 15 members. So we do appreciate all of the volunteers that are stepping forward to participate in that process. And then we'll follow that up with a public meeting on November 12th from 6:30 to 8:30 at the Monument Building for public input as well.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
And we can continue on. We'll bring it up to council for reports. Ms. Crummelo, do you have any reports? And Mr. Miller?
Our planning department and our contractors for the solar panel, solar farm on River Road will be meeting later this week to once again review the question of a solar plant on top of the top deck of the garage. There's some concern that the site is not sufficiently large enough to attract attention from bidders for a purchase power agreement, but we want to really push the envelope on this and see if we can find a contractor that would be interested in doing it in a way where at least the revenue stream to the municipality is positive, but not undertake it if it is not a positive revenue stream.
Mr. Rubin?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to the mayor and Corner House and the university and Not in Our Town and everyone that participated in the Unity March that was held on Saturday. I'm estimating, we think 50 or 60, what do you think? Maybe 50 or 60 people showed up, and Tatiana Sims, who was a coordinator, 18, 19-year-old young lady, did a terrific job. And we left here and marched all the way up to the university at the Friend Center, and then we had a panel discussion, and things turned out extremely well. So I just want to thank everybody that participated in the Unity March, and this was the beginning of something hopefully we can do every year and strengthen things up a little better. Also thank the police department, because when we arrived at Paul Robeson Place, they were able to guide us through the streets, so no one was hit or harmed, and it was just a great time. And a lot of the sponsors, like Starbucks, we had coffee, we had refreshments, we had various things, we had T-shirts, and it was really a nice event. So I just want to thank everybody for planning, and Princeton stepped up to the occasion, so thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Butler?
Yes, thank you. The Princeton Rec Department Fall and Winter Activities brochure is out and can be found online and probably around town in various places. Also on the inside of the brochure and then online, there is a message from the executive director about the Larry Ivan Fund. We're very close to the goal, and so I would encourage anyone who wants to donate and be a part of that. There's a GoFundMe site that can be found online, and they're still accepting donations. We approved the Mary Moss Park proposal at the Rec Board meeting last week, and so we'll bring that to the council, the first meeting in November. Is that okay? Also, I think coming the first meeting in November will be the open space presentation, if that still works. They would like to do that. Doubling back to rec, there are two things for special needs kids that are coming up. One is on Saturday, November 7th. There is, in conjunction with the Arts Council, Arts for Everyone at the Suzanne Patterson Center. It'll be a performance art for kids with families, people with special needs. There's also a special needs dance on November 13th at JW. And that's I think it for announcements. I do have some questions for Mr. Kaiser, but I think we can double back and wait for him.
Mr. Simon? Okay, I have a few reports, and the first one comes with a question for council. So if you remember at our last meeting, we wrote a letter to Senator Bateman encouraging him to vote to override Governor Christie's veto of a fairly common sense gun control piece of legislation that would make it more difficult to get a gun for people who have documented mental illness. And now I see Kim Cherry in the audience, so she may know the specifics. I know it's coming to the Assembly. I'm not sure exactly when, and it's possible it will come to the Assembly before our next meeting. So I wanted to ask Council if we should resubmit that letter to our Assembly representatives, and if everybody would like to come to the clerk's office to sign. Okay, so I will have copies ready, and we'll put everyone's name on it, so everyone should, or we can try the signature where we do it in italics, if that works for everybody as well.
Yeah, it does. We don't need to.
Okay, all right, so we'll do that. That will help make it more streamlined. And I just want to go on the record thanking Senator Bateman for taking our letter into consideration. I'm not sure if that was the deciding factor, and also thank a lot of our residents who are very active in meeting with him and telling him how important this issue is to certainly people in Princeton, if not throughout the state. There was a meeting of the Green Team last week, and one of the things we were talking about was really looking at a green purchasing plan, and Sustainable Princeton is working with administration on that, and details will be coming as that gets developed, but there's some exciting potential cost savings in there, as well as a plan that's better for the environment. This past weekend, there was the ride of the falling leaves through Mountain Lakes Park. I want to thank Deanna Stockton for being there, and for our police department and helping. It was maybe not quite as well attended as previous years because it looked like it was going to be raining, but it's actually a gorgeous day. So I recommend everybody rush out to Mountain Lakes Park in the next week before all the leaves fall down, but it was beautiful, and we had a nice turnout, and lots of little people too, which was nice to see. Let's see. Just a reminder, the election is coming up on Tuesday, November, what's the date? 3rd, Tuesday, November 3rd, and just wanted to send a message out there to candidates or people working on the campaigns about lawn signs, and we do like them to go where they should go legally, which is on people's property, not in the public right-of-way. And sometimes there's some confusion about that, but we always get complaints about the election signs going up in the public right-of-way. I'm starting to see some go up, so I think they actually do more good, too, if you put them on someone's lawn, because it looks like that person is supporting you as opposed to putting it in the middle of the street. And I'm going to be holding on Friday Meet the Mayor session at the public library inside the lobby starting at 8:30. So please come out for that if you have a question or an idea you'd like to share. And finally, this morning there was a meeting of the Transit Trust Fund, and we met with Mr. Kaiser and Pam Hirsch and Jim Constantine and a group that's been working on a proposal for bus shelters, which was approved this morning. And there's going to be a signature bus stop, hopefully in Palmer Square. It's still going to have to go through the Historic Preservation Committee, but the idea is to have a shelter with a green roof. And there was a suggestion even of maybe working to put some planters on it so it would match up with some of the flower pots along Nassau Street. And then in addition to that, to have 6 additional shelters. Oh, I should also mention that the signature shelter on Palmer Square would have a small solar panel that would have lights that illuminate at night. In addition, to have 6 bus shelters at stops that have heavy use. And then next year, have an additional 6 bus shelters. And these are very attractive bus shelters, and we can send a picture around so people can see them.
I'm sorry, these are different than the New Jersey?
They are approved by New Jersey Transit, but are more attractive because they have a rounded roof, and the additional 6 shelters would also have the solar panel with the lights.
But is New Jersey Transit paying for them?
They're paying for parts of them, and then we're paying for the additional solar panels and lighting.
And they have seating.
Well, I think all bus stops have seating, don't they? No?
Yeah. And just to remind everybody, the Transit Trust Fund is funded through a $500,000 donation from Princeton University, and this was one of the products of the Memorandum of Understanding that came out of the move of the Dinky Station to help improve transit. All right, I think that's the end of my report. So, Mr. Kaiser, do you have reports?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And I would just like to follow up regarding the bus shelter discussion. We just passed photographs around of the existing bus shelter that's at Bunn Drive at Princeton Community Village. And that particular design was the design that was chosen to be used as the standard bus shelters here in town as we move forward. The only difference will be to this particular shelter is there'll be a photovoltaic unit on top, there'll be a light in the shelter, and in addition, there will be the Princeton logo on either side of the shelter as well. So we're looking to move ahead with these shelters in the next few months, and then work to obtain approval for the signature shelter in the Palmer Square area, which requires HPC and State Historic approval. A few other things to comment on. We were contacted by the Barskys who need to install sewer lines across Nassau Street at 404, 406 Nassau. That's the location between Scott Lane and Cedar Lane. And the Department of Transportation has required that they do that work during nighttime hours of 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. So what I have requested of them is that they obtain approval from the police department, do it when police can be available to provide traffic control. There'll be one lane alternating traffic, and also that they personally notify all neighbors within 500 feet of the excavation of the nighttime work, and they intend to schedule that work within the next 2 weeks or so. Also, 33 Lytle Street. This is the structure that abuts Mary Moss Park, scheduled for demolition. The architectural features that we wanted to preserve from the porch area, they were preserved today. They were removed under the direction of Kevin Wilkes, who donated the services of his people to remove those items, and he will be storing them at his facility in Belmead. On Wednesday, the structure is scheduled to be removed by Barsky's contractor, and after that work is done and the site is cleaned up, we can then go ahead and close on the property. In addition, another item, Cherry Valley Road, we've been working with the county, and Cherry Valley Road, the culvert that's located between Heather Lane and Province Line Road, quarter-mile east of Province Line Road is scheduled to be replaced, and that work is scheduled to start on November 4th and last for 2 months. Mayor Lempert will be chairing a meeting on November 2nd with neighbors to inform them of that particular project. Also, some good news today, and that is that Mayor Lempert and Administrator DeShield had met with Lawrence Township, I guess about a month and a half ago or so, lobbying them to agree with Mercer County and Princeton to authorize DOT to eliminate the county designation on Mercer Road, Mercer Street, and Princeton Pike, and also to remove the truck designation on the DOT maps. Currently, the DOT maps, including the large truck map that permits up to double tractor trailers and 102-inch wide trucks, shows Princeton Pike, Mercer Road, and Mercer Street as being a truck route. Pleased to report that Lawrence Township Council approved a resolution supporting what the county has done and what Princeton has done to remove those designations. So we'll be following up with DOT to see that the maps are changed and so forth, and hopefully that will help reduce the amount of truck traffic that has been coming into town via those routes.
Thank you. I actually have about 4 things I need to follow up quickly. Is there any update on the Housing Authority house structure back there that is related, to the Mary Moss project? Yeah, the shed.
Correct. Yes, there is an update. The Housing Authority has been in contact with HUD. HUD has requested some additional information on the value. I gathered that information last week, and we'll be sending that back to them, and they'll be processing it. So we're still waiting on HUD.
Okay, but it's moving along.
It's moving along.
Well, and the Mary Moss project has probably gotten pushed back quite a ways, based on the Lytle Street discussion. We want to have something open during the summer, and so it now looks like 2017 anyway, so that'll be fine, but that's good that's coming along. Is Lawrence widening Princeton Pike down near 95? They cut down, they did a huge tree clearing down there, and...
I've driven through that area. It appears that work is being done in conjunction with the development of the land abutting that section of roadway.
Okay. Also, the Butler tract, the neighbors over there have been in touch, and they're eager to know. They'd like to meet with someone about what's going on with that project, and I don't know whether they should meet with you or with Jeff Grosser. I think based on discussions, I think that we have some answers that we can give to them based on what we know about demolition. They're worried about things like asbestos. Some of the answers we have, whether or not we have a response from the university about the lead, I think there are other issues and answers we could have for them if they knew.
Yes, and if I could respond, we've had a number of meetings with the university. The university has now provided a protocol for the demolition that staff finds to be satisfactory. And we've had discussions with the university regarding meeting with neighbors and so forth. They've indicated that they would certainly be willing to meet. I would also recommend that staff attend the meeting as well, so that we can see that the university goes through this protocol that staff is now satisfied with, and discuss the project. University has indicated that they're planning to have the work started sometime end of November, early December. They anticipate the demolition itself taking for 4 to 6 weeks. They have authorized us to have a full-time person there on site, and we'll be covering that through their escrow to monitor the process. So certainly be willing to be part of a meeting with neighbors to discuss that project in greater detail.
What kind of full-time person would we have on site?
We'll have to see how things shake out. It'll either be one of our staff members, depending if they're available, or we would use either somebody from Whitman's firm or Van Cleef Engineering, who have done this type of inspection work for us as well.
And is the university going to arrange this meeting, or should we arrange it? I mean, who's going to take responsibility for it?
We could certainly work with the university to set that up. We could have the meeting here in the municipal offices or at the university, whatever works out best. But
Okay. If we want to talk offline, I do have some suggestions about things that might be covered that would be helpful to the neighbors.
that would be fine.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other staff reports? No? Okay. Was there, I don't want to pick on you, but were you here for a particular item? Because we don't want to make you wait. Yeah. No, okay. Okay, no, that's great. No, sometimes, like, if you're here waiting for something, I don't want to torture you, and I'm glad you're here. Okay, excellent. Okay, great. All right, so that's where we are now, is our work session on the 2016 budget, and I don't know if I should turn it over to Ms. Webb or to Mr. DeShield to walk us through some of these items.
Thank you, Mayor. And we'll start with our 2016 budget discussion. And really what we want to do is accomplish a couple of things this evening, and that's one is to get guidance on the creation of a budget schedule for 2016. Two is guidance on the use of surplus for 2016 budget. And again, it's early on, so we're just looking for some general guidance. Two, guidance on potential procedural changes for 2016 and the budget process. And then any operational budget targets or guidelines in the preparation of the 2016 budget. And where we will start is I'll just let Ms. Webb go through the actual budget calendar, and we'll start there, and then we'll go down the list.
Okay, thank you. So we started out this budget season a couple of weeks ahead of schedule from where we were last year. We got the forms out earlier, the departments responded, they turned everything around pretty quickly for us. So we have back all of capital. Capital has gone to administration for their review. I'm still putting together the operating. I still have some key components that are missing, like some of our insurance numbers, our pension numbers, the state has not released yet. So that'll all be coming together hopefully within the next month or so. So my target is to have the budget, the operating budget to administration in November. Excuse me, have them review it during the month of November. I'll get it to them certainly early enough to allow them to have ample time to review it. We'll create a draft budget based on any changes that Mr. DeShield recommends. And in the email that Mr. Simon sent earlier to me in terms of the budget calendar, he asked that in all the places that the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee is going to meet to discuss the budget, that the Princeton's Finance Committee, which is made up of a couple of elected officials, that we add them onto this schedule as well. And that's not a problem. So we're planning to have what I'm calling our due diligence meetings with council in February, and Mr. Simon had asked if maybe we want to move that up to January, and it's, certainly okay with me. I just, add some caution. This is really, Mark came in when we had already had the budget started last year, so, I want to make sure he has enough time to go through a thorough review. So we could, we can shoot for January. If we make that target, we could change it, or we could change the calendar now, and if we don't make it, then bring the resolution back and have the due diligence meetings in February.
And just to explain my rationale for making that request is if the state stays on schedule, which they almost never do.
Correct.
But if they stay on schedule, then we're introducing the budget February 10th.
Right.
And we really should have due diligence meetings, at least round one, with members of council before that, so that we're introducing something that's had at least a little bit of input from every member of the council. So that's the thinking behind that.
Okay.
So if we can try to figure out whether that's December or January, whatever we should, and then
I mean, we
this
can
down.
change it to January, shoot for that. If for some reason we need a little more time to pull some things together and we're not ready to have them in January, then, you know, we can bring the resolution back to council.
That's fine.
Are there any questions about the calendar? Because we have a resolution to adopt the calendar, so I want to make sure we...
Right, so I guess just to set the stage for this, I'd like to introduce it with the amendments just described. So adding the Finance Committee to the CFAC review lines and changing the due diligence meetings with mayor and council to, why don't we say January and February 2016?
Second.
Yep. Oh, wait, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we can have a discussion about it. Mr. Miller and then Ms. Miller.
Sandy, of those first 6 dates, have they all been met?
Yes.
Thank you.
Wait, the goals and objectives of governing
That's
body?
what that's what this meeting is now, that Mark is going to lead you through some discussions on some of the...
Okay, that's what I was wondering about.
Policies.
So the resolution to adopt the budget calendar has been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Can I just ask a quick question relative to Patrick's amendment? So you want the Finance Committee in December 2015 and in January 2015 at the same level as the CFAC?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we'll move on to the framework discussion that you've outlined here.
And next, we will go through kind of developing the framework. As Sandy has just mentioned, we've started very early on in this process, so we do not have a lot of numbers at this point to really give counsel. So we're really going to be doing a 1,000-foot level kind of analysis at this point. So actually, I'm glad that you added in the January meeting, because we will come back to you guys with some additional information. So let's first look at an evaluation of our surplus. What we did was our preliminary surplus projections for the end of the year 2015. We took a look at that projection based on what we're seeing this year. It looks like we will be stable. That will keep our surplus in our target range of about 15 to 20% of the expenditures going into 2016. One thing I do want to note, council should remember, is last year we anticipated use of surplus an additional $100,000 in anticipation of an increase from Princeton University. We can now remove that from the budget because we will be receiving that increase as of this year. Based on that and our new, what our projections are going into 16 is relatively stable. My recommendation is that in looking at the surplus, we remain at a stable use of surplus moving into next year. And again, as we get better numbers, we'll come back to council, but just looking to make sure that council's on the same page in terms of surplus. No comments. I will move on to the next.
Actually, if you want a comment on the surplus, I do have a question. In that 15 to 20% range, are we closer to the 15 or to the 20%?
Where we were.
Okay. And are there any sort of decisions before us that would potentially involve the option of spending spending some amount of the surplus? Is that?
We're not at this point. We're not ready for that. Once we have a better idea of where the budget is, we'd give you those options. But at this point, we're really just kind of projecting down the road.
Okay.
Just to answer your question, Kathy, I'm looking at the projection we have from March, and I think that was the final projection for the surplus, right? That had us at 17% this year, and it would project for next year to be just slightly under that, like 16.8.
the next one, and one of the things, looking at procedural changes in process, last year we included the Finance Committee as part of the budget process. I thought that was very successful, and I'd like to continue to use that, the committee this year as part of the budget process, and actually integrate them more into that process, so use them a lot more in the process. And again, one change that I'd like to offer to council is, one of the things we did was, last year we provided a baseline budget, which did not include any operational changes or increase in FTEs. So when we introduced the budget, we introduced a baseline budget. One of the issues with doing that is it then put council in kind of a funny position of making policy decisions. So what I'd like to do is, prior to the introduction of the budget, present the baseline budget, and then have you look at alternatives before we introduce the budget. So if there are alternatives you want to put in the budget, we're not doing them as amendments that we did last year. We can do them as an introduced budget this year. So that's what I'd like to see change in this year's budget to make the process a little smoother. And at this point, I'm really looking for, are there any other kind of policy issues that the council would like, process issues the council would like to see change? The other thing that we're going to change this year, in meeting with the Finance Committee earlier, is to take a look at some program reviews of a couple of programs, that we'll review those with council in terms of taking an in-depth look at the different programs.
Well, if I could follow up on that too, Councilman Miller and Patrick Simon and I are on the Finance Committee, and so as we look at those programming issues, if you have anything that either you would have a question about, or question why we're doing it, or going forward, whether it's a good idea, let us know. Or something you particularly want to support.
Do we know if there's going to be big changes that we should be anticipating? Like one, I know I see Mr. Huff out there, is that, we've gotten word that our landfill site is going to be closing within the next 2 years. And so what does that mean in terms of our trash costs, and how do we anticipate? I mean, I guess that's not going to be hitting us next year, but to just start to anticipate something like that. And are there any other big things that are going to be hitting us in next year that we should be aware of?
I'm sorry, I meant to mention that to council. We've actually, in looking at the preliminary numbers that we have, there are no major changes outside of either additional staffing requests or additional program requests. I don't think there's anything major that I've seen so far in the budget, and we're still putting it together at this point, but I don't foresee any major. The only issues that we do need to understand is we still don't have our pension numbers, so we don't know what those are, and our health insurance, which are usually our big drivers. Outside of that, we don't see any other additional major changes in the budget.
So are we going to have the discussion about the programs and their analysis in a council meeting? I mean, it seems like a good idea to do that.
Yeah, I will be presenting those to the entire council.
The ones that Joe just talked about?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, if you have something in mind, I think that it would be...
No, I know. I'll let you know what I'm thinking,
Right,
but
so it
I'm
can
just
be
saying...
sort of kicked around in the Finance Committee level before it's brought
Right.
to the...
Right, the way
council.
I would expect the committee to work is to review it with the Finance Committee and then decide what to pull forward to the full council versus
Right.
what isn't worth, bringing to a council discussion.
And are those things where, does that process, I should look back at the calendar, happen before or after we're putting together our goals for 2016?
Hold on, that would probably be, it's likely to be after we're putting together our goals.
Okay, so that will help be informed by what we're planning to do, which should be helpful.
Yeah.
Can you be, I want this to be a useful discussion for you, so are there more pointed questions you have for us where we can give you more feedback or guidance so you don't go down a path that then is we're gonna...
Again, at this point, we are really early on in the process. And again, if there are any major issues that council foresees moving into the 16 budget, that's what I'd like to hear from council at this point. I will be coming back to you as we get more information to kind of have more of an in-depth conversation. But at this point, we haven't even put together the budgets. Unfortunately, last year, we're at a point where we're looking at the actual budget. We could really have a conversation because we were further along in the process.
One thing we had talked about, last year or the year before was if there's any way to incentivize or to reward departments that are really looking at efficiencies and cost cutting, because I think I probably speak for everybody that we're very sensitive to the property tax rates, and we want to do everything we can for our residents and to make sure that message is getting across. And I don't know if there's something we can do creatively to help departments and to encourage them to find those efficiencies.
Right, that's what I was going to ask, that exact question. How can we incentivize, is there a way to incentivize the departments to cut down if possible? And also, I think we should emphasize that we'd like a 0% increase if possible. I think that's what we're all looking for. And then also our goal of moving more capital to operating. Is that something that you're just assuming? We discussed, I think, didn't we resolve to do that officially?
We started last year, and hopefully in this year's budget, as we go through the budget, that will be one of the goals, and we'll present it to you what are the impacts and how we can do it.
Well, I remember last year, I think that we said that we'll put a number of, $600,000 or something of that sort.
Well, we did do an amount, I just don't remember.
200,000.
200,000?
Right.
So maybe we can increase that, Jenny. That might be a big way.
And, excuse me, if I can just say one thing. I said that we started the calendar earlier, as far as the distribution of the forms and everybody turning them around pretty quickly. This resolution didn't come to you last year until November. That's historically when it comes. So we're usually better prepared to really get some finite answers from all of you. So this resolution coming a little earlier makes us not as prepared because we didn't have another month to really target some of the numbers that we need to.
Yeah, no, understood, and I think this is a bit of a chicken and egg problem that we have every time we do it. So it feels like if we wait till we have all the numbers, then it's almost too late. So I think it's helpful to be discussing as the numbers come in, and I think we all understand at this point that it's, for some of this, it's somewhat theoretical. Fluid, thank you. A living document.
A living document.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments before we move on?
Well, actually, just reacting to Councilman Cromweller's comment, that a request for 0% tax increase is a significant request. So I think
Okay.
I'm looking back at the surplus projection spreadsheet that we'd had in the spring, and that had about a 4% increase for this year, which is, I think, what we realized, and we were expecting around a 3% increase next year.
3% taxes?
I think so. That was to keep the surplus essentially flat.
Right, I should qualify that with only, I would support that only with, as a prudent budgeting measure. I wouldn't want to change surplus or give up our goal of moving from operating to capital.
Okay. I just want to know what the prioritization of the items, I think, in terms of our discussions.
And go at that slightly differently. Would council want the administrator to come back to us with recommendations as to what could be done to achieve a zero municipal property tax increase? In other words, in order to get there, what would you have to do?
We've had a version of this conversation with the Finance Committee, and I think the prerequisite for that is that we have to give some communication to the administration what we'd be willing to see cut from programs offered this year in order to be able to realistically assess that. And you correct me if I've got that wrong, but that's what I took away from the Finance Committee meeting.
And I think that's the point. One of the things, in order to get to a zero budget, it's likely that it would require some heavy cutting, and I would need guidance from council when we get to that point of, what are we going to cut? And I'd rather see that come from council than, to just kind of bring that out to them. But if that's something...
So you're looking for the Council Finance Committee to make that recommendation back to you?
If you wanted to see a proposed 0% budget, it would require, I think, some significant cuts. I would like to have a conversation with council in terms of guidance on, what are the areas in terms of services that we're willing to take a look at before we kind of go into that process.
But what part of that is that they're going to be looking at the programs and how much they're costing us, right?
Yes,
So,
but just to explain in round numbers why that's an issue, if we've got approximately a $61 million budget, assume inflation rate of about 2%, that's a little over 1.2 million just to stay even. That would be our increase in nominal dollars. And so if we wanted to not have that increase, we'd have to find $1.2 million to cut, approximately, all right? So that's the root of the problem right there.
And I know looking forward, another thing we can anticipate is we've been paying off the transition costs from consolidation, which were amortized over 5 years. So we're in year 3, right? We're in year 3, not year 2, right? Correct. For the amortization? All right, so then we have 2 more years of that, but then we can expect a benefit to our budget, but that wouldn't be until 2018. Is that my math right?
2017, isn't it? 18?
2018, okay. So, I mean, the other thing to look at is in terms of how aggressive we're being at moving our debt service over into, or our capital into operating, is to maybe time it somewhat with that drop-off, so that, I know it's one of those things where long-term you even out and you do better, but it's just getting there, you're paying twice, and that's what makes it so difficult, because you're paying both for the past expenditures and you're not taking the benefit of continuing that way and capitalizing your costs. So it's, if there's a way to make that less painful or to take advantage of other costs dropping off, that would be my preference. All right. Are there any other comments before we move on? No? Okay. Thank you. And then I want to ask your forgiveness. I forgot to say something at the very beginning of the meeting about changing tonight's agenda, which is to add a item to the closed session at the end of the meeting, which is under negotiations for open space acquisition, Princeton land development. And is there a motion to amend the agenda to add that to closed session at the end of the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
It's moved by Ms. Butler and seconded by Ms. Krummeler. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so please add that to the closed session at the end. And next we, were you here for the budget? Did you want to make a comment? Okay, I don't mean to keep putting you on the spot. I just don't want to ignore you either. So you raise your hand if
You're very special. You're very special tonight.
You have to come to the mic, though, if you want to speak, so people can hear you.
I'm Sharon Aola with PSRC. We saw you all last week at the gala.
Yes.
And I'm just here because, as you know, we're thinking about plans for the future, and I've thought for a long time that it's important for us to kind of stay on top of what council is thinking and doing, and for you to know us as well. So This was the first time that I've come to one, and I've scared you.
No, we welcome you.
So I'm not here because I have any problems in particular, but just to observe, if that's okay.
No, that's terrific. Thank you.
You're always welcome, please.
Thank you.
Yep. Bring friends. Thanks.
Okay. The first resolution for this evening, 15-307, which is confirming the sewer assessment for 210 Terhune Road, and this was left over from the larger list we had for the Terhune Road sewer assessment adjustments.
I assume that we went back out there.
That was written in the memo that came with the agenda packet,
Oh, I
that
didn't
it was
see
all
it.
cleared up.
Okay.
But I don't know if there's any questions for Mr. Huff, or if there's a motion.
I'll move it.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krummeler and seconded by Mr. Liverman. Is there any comments or questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously. Next is 15-308, repurchase of affordable housing units, 218 Brookhouse Road for $78,000 and 105 Hamilton Avenue for $100,264.
I'll move that.
I'll second it.
It's moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Ms. Krummeler. Is there any comment or questions? Mr. Simon?
Yes, just to confirm, these are both COA qualified homes? Or not?
Well, no, that's what we're looking into for Hamilton.
So our affordable housing program does include affordable housing that's not COA qualified?
Yes.
This memo says it's an affordable unit.
Both of them?
No, they were COA qualified units now, and I said we were looking into that, the Hamilton Avenue.
Right, we were told-
We're looking into it.
Yeah.
As you speak.
Because we're not sure.
Yeah. Because on.
I know we discussed that at the meeting earlier today, but I'm not sure.
We weren't sure.
Whether the information that Shirley provided was correct or not. I believe they are COA qualified. So we just need to check that.
Yeah, well, I think what we had.
Certainly the one on Brickhouse Road is.
Yeah, but we were checking the deed, I believe, on Hamilton Avenue. I think that's what we were trying to check.
Well, but the justification for moving at this time is to make sure that we don't lose the affordability controls.
Yes,
So
It doesn't matter.
That's not the same as COA.
It's not.
No, that's not the same.
Municipal affordability controls, all right.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. If there's no further questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next, 15-309, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton authorizing final change order for Trap Rock Industries LLC road materials contract in the amount of $390,000. It's moved by Ms. Krummeler.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next, 15-310, fair share agreement with Lawrence Township for the purchase of a new leaf turner in an amount not to exceed $52,015. Is there a motion?
I'll move it.
It's moved by Ms. Krummeler
I'll turn it.
and seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any questions or discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next, we come to our consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature, passed by single vote. I wanted to just draw everyone's attention to an updated boards, committees, and commissions appointment list, which just includes Doug Rubin to serve as the citizen representative for the Bike Master Plan Steering Committee, and also officially having Mr. Simon be the council liaison, and Ms. Crummell and I already serve on it as members of the planning board. So I don't know if there's any items anybody wants to remove from the consent agenda, and if not, is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Ms. Butler. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes unanimously, and is there a motion to move into closed session?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Liverman, seconded by Ms.
No, I didn't move this one.
Moved by, sorry,
Bernie and Joe, I believe.
Moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Ms. Butler. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.